Hello chickens, this is a episode of Tea and Tarot where I drink tea and I talk about tarot, and today it's kind of like tea and tarot on tour because I'm not at my house, which means that when it comes to the tea for the episode I didn't have a choice. I just kind of had to take what was in their cupboard, so it's kind of like what we Brits would call a breakfast tea, which I think is technically just a mishmash of a few different blends that kind of have come together to make something kind of standard but that tastes like what we would say British tea tastes like. And I like to drink this in the morning myself at home when I've not really gotten my head around what kind of tea day I want to have. I wouldn't necessarily have herbal tea first thing in the morning, I would just have something like this. It's just kind of like the standard cup. It's nice, it's good. I'm sure I haven't sold it to you very well, but it is lovely. Um, so yeah, the fact that I couldn't just go to my tea cupboard this morning and like select one of a myriad of teas got me thinking about the aspect of choice, the element of choice in our lives and how we deal with it and how a lot of us have very different ways of dealing with it. And I was thinking about how tarot could potentially tap into that and have something to say to us about the value of making positive choices. So I've drawn a few cards that I think might apply in the subject of thinking about choices and thinking about how we make our choices, how we apply our thoughts and our feelings to our choices, and how other people and the outside world would influence our choices or indeed our ability to make one choice or another. So that's kind of where I'm going with today's episode. The first card that I selected was the Ace of Pentacles because I think one of the most important things about choice in life is that you make a commitment. A lot of the time we overplan and we start thinking about all these different avenues we could go down with a choice that we need to make. We kind of bat the ball of the choice around, we weigh up the pros and cons a lot, but a lot of the time we don't realise that when we're doing things like this, it's actually a distraction from the fact that a choice is only made once we make a commitment. And making a commitment starts primarily as a thought, but really it's brought into being through an action. And that's why I've chosen the Ace of Pentacles, because the Ace of Pentacles is really about the beginning of something which is evident in the physical realm, something that is evident in the tangible realm. It's evident in our lives. It's something that's taken place that other people can see. So oftentimes when we work out which choice we want to make, which road we want to go down, it can be easy to stay there and just have it as a thought forever and not actually put any strong action behind it. But that can be fatal when it comes to making a choice that really matters and really could change the trajectory of your life. It's very important not to stop at the thought, but in fact also to embrace the action. Making a commitment is about standing in your power in the physical realm, standing in your truth, absorbing it, letting it envelop you, and thinking, now I can go forward and I can make a decision which is going to lead to something tangible. I can make an action in the physical realm that will show that my decision is tangible, that there is no going back, and that I am willing to commit my resources to it, emotional, financial, whatever else. So I kind of feel like, making a commitment is one of those things when we are faced with an array of different choices that we could make, and we kind of have worked out in our hearts which choice we want to actually embrace. It can be very easy to stay there in the imagination stage of that choice, that's making that decision, and it can be easy to actually not push ourselves to do anything in the tangible realm to show that we have made that commitment and we are starting out on the path. So I think that's very important, and I think tarot has a lot of messages to give about the value of making a physical commitment, making a commitment that you and everyone else in your life can see, to show them that indeed you are confident with your choice, that you've thought it through, and that you would rather do something than do nothing at all, that you would rather get past that planning stage and actually prove to yourself that you are made of something stronger than just to plan and hash and rehash, that you actually want to do something to make your choice manifest and see where it ultimately leads. Which leads me nicely on to the next card, which is the Seven of Cups. The Seven of Cups I just love. I've blogged about it quite a few times now. Well, no, I think I've only blogged about it twice, but I've mentioned it in so many other blog posts because it's such a great representation of the massive array of choice that we have. And it's such a great way of explaining how choice can be so incredibly complex and how the whole aspect of choice in our lives can actually be quite maddening at times. So I kind of like to refer to the Seven of Cups quite a lot when I'm talking about releasing in order to receive. a lot of the time when we make a choice which is going to have a major kind of rolling effect on our lives, or when we realize that we are very much at a crossroads and that there definitely is a choice that needs to be made in order to move on to the next phase, we need to accept a lot of the time that something needs to be released in order for something else to be received, or if you like, something needs to be let go of in order for our hands and our arms to be free to embrace the next thing, whatever that is. So sometimes there is an aspect of compromise when we make a choice, and that's why so many people feel the fear when it comes to making choices, because we know that we are going to have to lose something or destroy something or pull away from something in order to really grasp hold of something else, something new, something different, a new set of possibilities. And that can be very scary, especially when we're comfortable with the status quo and we are comfortable with the zone that we're in. We don't really want to move out of it. We don't really want to explore. And we don't want to have to prove to ourselves that we are strong enough, that we are brave enough, that we are imaginative enough, that we are tenacious and dynamic enough to actually invite that new choice into our lives. So a lot of the time we just sit there kind of looking at everything and appreciating that we have choices, but knowing that whichever choice we choose, we have to lose something else. And I think also this card has a very strong message about the value of actually, if you have several different choices, several different ways you could go, and you see the value in every single one of them, and that's what's kind of paralyzing you, that's what's making you unable to make the choice because you see the value in every choice that you could make, then I would say that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Just pick one of these and, make that commitment to it. Because a lot of the time, if you don't really know where you want to end up, if everything looks good, if the choice is really overwhelming and you're thinking, a few of these things look like great opportunities, then any road will get you there. So I think it's just important to make that commitment in the tangible realm. And even if in the end you decide that, this cup was in fact better than this cup and you should have selected something else, you can go back, but at least you've proved to yourself that you can make that commitment in the tangible realm. And I think that's another thing that's very important about this card is, again, not to get stuck in those planning stages, but to at least commit to something. And then you'll prove to yourself that you can make that commitment. And if you need to change the trajectory later on, then you certainly can do. You're entitled to do that. But yeah, I do feel that the Seven of Cups often has a message for us about the importance of accepting that sometimes we will need to release something in order to receive something else. And I'm sure you can all think of a few examples in your own life of when that's had to happen, when you wanted to push forward, you wanted to progress, but something needed to be either destroyed, or you needed to distance yourself from it, or you needed to accept that it was no longer going to be the central core of your life if you wanted to progress with this new decision. And that is very difficult. It's one of the most difficult things we need to accept about the power of choice, is that often there is compromise involved, but it will be worth it eventually. We need to release ourselves from the emotional bonds that have built up over time as a result of being attached to that status quo and understanding that it's been comfortable for us. When we make a big decision which will potentially change things, we need to appreciate not whether or not the status quo is comfortable, but whether or not the status quo truly serves us anymore. And a lot of the time, it really doesn't. Good stuff. Okay, the next card that I've selected is the Two of Pentacles. And there are a great many cards that I could have selected to make this next point. But I would say the Two of Pentacles really fits, because what I really want to say at this point about choice is that a lot of the time we're afraid to make a choice because we're scared of hurting other people. We're scared of hurting the status quo. Yes, we're scared of stepping out of our comfort zone, but a lot of the time we'd be highly surprised if we sat back and actually looked at what is influencing our choice, or what is stopping us from making our choice. We'd be surprised how often it's someone else. We weigh up the pros and cons of our choice and we actually look into what our choice entails, but we are always thinking about either the expectations of somebody else, the feelings of somebody else, what does that somebody else want, whether it's a partner, whether it's a parent, whether it's a friend, whether it's colleagues. We are always thinking about our human interconnectedness, and a lot of us, if we're intuitive, if we're empathetic, if we have strong bonds with our fellow man, then a lot of the time we are going to worry about how our choices affect other people. And sometimes that can bring us into a state of what I like to call choice paralysis, where we literally just can't go forward because we're so scared of going through that process of individuation and potentially disappointing somebody else. And that can leave us very much in this cycle, and it's almost like this is kind of us and what we want out of the choice and where we want to go, But then the other side of it is, what will everybody else think? How will everybody else feel? How will everybody else cope if I leave, or if I change my mind, or if I really admit that this is what I truly want? How will other people fare? Am I being selfish, you know? Am I being self-involved? Should I perhaps concede and compromise for the greater good? I think the important thing to realise here is that it's very important to understand that you must be in the seat of your own power in order to live an empowering life, and in order to live a life that you want. And, you know, in 50 years' time, when you look back, you'll know that you lived a life that reflected what you really wanted, what you really believed, what you really were chasing after. Even if everything didn't come together exactly as you dreamed it would do, at least you know that you never measured yourself by anybody else's yardstick. And a lot of the time when we have this choice paralysis because we're so concerned about what other people think, and it drags us round in this cycle where we feel like we can't actually make the choice for ourselves, it's because we are measuring ourselves by somebody else's yardstick, or we're letting somebody else tell us who we should be or what we should be. And I think for a lot of people who've spent a long time in their lives being concerned about what somebody else thinks, or being concerned about trying to win the support of somebody else or the approval of somebody else, when they look back, they will always say that they felt a tinge of regret. You know, I can't think of a single person who would really stand up and say, yep, I lived the last however many years of my life seeking the approval and validation of somebody else, and I never really stood in the seat of my power and said, I think this might be what I want to do, because I was worried about hurting that person and that person meant a lot to me. I mean, come on, how many people do you know who are really going to say that was a great way to live my life and I'm so happy that I made that choice? You know, we talk about standing in the seat of our power for a reason. We talk about it because life, the life we're in now, this physical life in this, on this particular realm, is only going to last for a certain number of days. And we talk about standing in the seat of our power because this is literally our story, and each one of us is the main character in our own story, and that is how we should live. We shouldn't live as though we're an extra in our own tale. And I've told a few of my clients that. I've told them that, you know, they're living as extras in their own story, and that is just not on. That's not going to fly. So, you know, I think it's very important when we're actually trying to make a choice and we're trying to struggle through the pros and cons and weigh up, you know, what could be released, what could be received, and how we're ultimately going to feel about it. It's so important to take note, look at how much of your mental and emotional energy is being spent thinking about what other people are going to do, or what other people are going to assume, or how other people are going to feel. It's so important that you have a look at how much energy you're investing into that premise, because if you're investing too much into it, you need to stop. I think that's very important. And I know every situation is different and it's easier said than done. But when you are making decisions that could potentially change the trajectory of your life, you must stand in the seat of your power. You owe yourself that much. And I think a lot of people who can't do that feel that they can't do that because they have to consider what others want, or what others feel, or what others may expect, or what make other people happy. Those people are people who are incredibly giving and incredibly empathetic and incredibly considerate. So, you know, the chances are, if you're stuck making a decision because you're too concerned about what other people think, you've already done quite enough for those people, and you've already considered their feelings enough, and you've already been the best daughter you could be, the best colleague you could be, the best friend you could be, or partner or sister, whatever. I'm sure that you've already done enough, because if you're considering their feelings and their position this much during a really important decision-making time for you, then it's obvious that you are just a very empathetic person. You're very understanding, and you're very concerned about the human relationships that you have. So the chances are that you've really not been that selfish in your life, and it might be time to appreciate the value of selfishness and self-centeredness when it comes to something that may potentially change everything for you. You know, those people don't have to live with your decision. You have to live with it. So you have to make it from heart level, and it has to be for you. The next card I've chosen is the Nine of Swords, and you know, with this card, I'm thinking really about the fear of getting it wrong. The fear of making a decision and getting it wrong is really just a fear of trusting your intuition, or a fear that your intuition is not in fact what it seems to be. And I think it's really important, when I discussed in another video, in a former video, the difference between intuition and paranoia, I think it's so important to identify the difference as well between intuition and ego. I think that ego, as I said, does have a very bad rep. Ego does have an important part to play, and we have the word ego for a reason. It's not just supposed to be a disparaging term that means self-centeredness or, you know, concern about what other people think of you. The concept of ego is much bigger than that. But for the purpose of this tea and tarot episode, what I would like to talk about, sorry, what I'd like to talk about is the potential of spending too long being concerned about a decision you're making because you're worried that you're going to get it wrong. You're worried that you're going to look stupid. You're worried that you are going to appear to have been incompetent. You know, you're worried that you're going to get a little bit further down the line and realise, oh my God, that wasn't really what I wanted and there's no way back. Insecurity, just worry about how it's going to look if you get things wrong. A lot of the time your ego tries to protect you and tries to protect the image of you that you've built up in your own mind and that you want to project out to other people by telling you to stay still and by telling you not to take any unnecessary risks in case you look foolish or in case you're not going to be able to find a way back to where you were before. Intuition will never tell you those things. So if you've got those seeds of thought in your mind that are telling you to stay put and that are telling you not to follow your bliss, telling you not even to try and find out what your bliss is, those little noises in your head are not the noises of intuition. They are noises from ego. Now, ego is trying to protect you and ego is trying to warn you, and sometimes those warnings and those elements of protection can be very good and they should be listened to. A lot of the time, for example, when something is not appropriate, when you are going down a road in public saying something or doing something that you will later on regret, it will be your ego that will step in and say, now let's think about propriety here, let's think about how other people feel. That will be a message from ego, and that's a very nice thing for ego to do for you. That's not bad. But sometimes your ego can be very overzealous and your ego can be very desiring of your image that you have of yourself and will not want you to do anything that may potentially threaten that. And that's when intuition will kind of dive in and say, God, do you really, really want to live by this image of yourself forever? Or do you want to branch out? Do you want to get clear? Do you want to take some risks? I think that the fear of getting it wrong is very obvious and usual and very understandable when big decisions come along. Of course, we all fear making that decision which we're later going to regret. But if you live by the whims of your intuition, if you go deep within and you follow that inner voice, and it normally starts with, getting right with your core being, centering yourself, which takes quiet, contemplative time ordinarily, particularly if you've not been good at centering yourself in the past, or you haven't done that for a long time. You are wanting to listen only to your inner voice here. So take some time away from the crowd, from the advice of others, just get rid of all that white noise and take some time to sit with yourself, find your core and have a little discussion with yourself about what's going on, because I think often the fear of getting it wrong does come from that place of ego which is overzealous, or which is afraid of looking like an idiot, which is afraid of people kind of wondering what the hell is that choice all about, why didn't she just take this other road? But I think it's important to filter out those outside influences when you are afraid of getting it wrong, because if you are truly in touch with your inner voice, then there is no question of you getting it wrong, because if you have the success that you visualize, then you had the success you visualized, and if the road goes a different way, then your intuition sent you a very valuable lesson and it will have enriched you incredibly. So there is no wrong choice when you are in touch with your intuition. And I think, the more you get in touch with that intuition, the more you'll realise when it's trying to talk to you. But for a lot of people at first, it's difficult. Permission to be independent. I chose the Knight of Swords for this because, this guy really is the very image of independence, let's face it. He's all out of fucks to give. He is riding right into that new trajectory. He is brave, he is free, he has elucidated what he wants and he's going after it with determination, with tenacity, and with a great deal of kind of poetic passion as well. So I think giving yourself permission to be independent is something that a lot of people who struggle with making important choices find that they need to do before anything can happen. And if you've spent a great deal of your life kind of looking after other people or seeking validation from other people or understanding that those people expect a lot from you, and likewise if you've spent a lot of your life unable to see why you're worthy, unable to see why you're deserving, if you've been downtrodden, if you felt undervalued a lot of the time, if you found yourself to be easily manipulated and you know that you need to work on that, making a decision that can change the trajectory of your entire life is like learning to be this guy here. It really is. And I think making that decision, making that commitment that I talked about at the beginning of the episode will often lead you into a much greater feeling of confidence and independence. A lot of the time we think that we need to be this guy before we can make any significant decisions, when in fact it's actually making a significant decision that will help you to encapsulate and personify this guy, because the Knight of Swords is within all of us. This massive, passionate, almost brutal urge for independence is within all of us. I truly believe it. And I truly believe that a lot of the time we leave ourselves on the shelf and we prevent ourselves from making those decisions that will make the difference because we think we are not here yet and therefore we aren't able to act in our own best interests. But in fact, it's inviting that element of choice into your life and it's making that choice for yourself. It's realizing that any path will get you there and it's getting yourself onto that path regardless, but it's going to help you realize where the Knight of Swords is within you, where that archetype is, where that hero is, where that independent person is within you. And making that decision, making that commitment, and getting onto that pathway is what's going to give you your time to shine. And finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about accountability. The Emperor is a good image for accountability. Now, he is totally in the seat of his own realm. He is in the seat of his power. He is in control of his own life. And he has chosen to be that way. He has chosen to go off and find his own place and make his mark, and he's decided to be the ruler of his own realm. He doesn't want to take orders from people. He's not interested in that. He's going for vehement independence and he's going for domination over his own existence. And a lot of the time that comes from a place of bitter experience, I feel, with the Emperor, where he actually was the monkey to somebody else's organ grinder for a long time and he realised that wasn't what he wanted. He realised that he needed to stand in the seat of his power and to have something that was truly his. But with that feeling of independence and that wonderful feeling of freedom comes a great deal of personal accountability, and making a choice that is going to change the trajectory of your life or change things for you in a significant way is going to take accountability and responsibility. You're going to have to be responsible for yourself. You're going to have to be responsible for the consequences and you're going to have to follow through. And a lot of the time I feel that's another reason that people have a huge fear of getting it wrong. If you understand that you want to take accountability for your own actions, that you want to take responsibility for your own life, that you don't want to blame anybody else, that you don't want to look to anybody else for the answers, that you feel that the answers are within and that you're not going to lay waste to victimhood, or you're not going to surrender to that feeling that it's somebody else's fault or that somebody else will pick up the pieces. Once you've realised that accountability is one of the most beautiful things you can give to yourself in this life, then the fear of making the wrong choice will completely diminish, because you will know that if you made a choice that later on didn't seem right for you, or you had to change your mind, or you feel that in the eyes of others you may not have made the right choice and that's a concern for you, if you are ready and willing to take full accountability for your life and your actions, then any road will truly get you there. Because if you feel that you need to turn around and make a change, if you look at the map and you realise the terrain isn't what you thought it was going to be and you need to switch things up, if you're taking accountability for yourself, then it is your journey and you are holding your own hand. You know that you do not need to answer to anybody else, and that will truly diminish the fear of making the choice in the first place. So that was why I wanted to talk about that, just to finish things off, because I feel that all of these points are very much tied in together when we think about making a decision which is going to benefit us and which is going to empower us. So I hope this has been helpful to you, and this has been Tea and Tarot, and thank you very much for listening.